Hello. Our story begins following the failed assassination attempt on Senator Padme Amidala of the Naboo. There were two failed attempts in her life, the first one being at the landing platforms and the second one being at the end of a circuit of Pass the Torch. After two bounty hunters, one count, one delivery droid, an array of bombs, and two bugs didn't kill her, the Jedi finally decided that it was time to send her back to Naboo. Padme was obviously very reluctant to this idea, but she couldn't really refute it. The Chancellor was adamant that she go back to Naboo though. Captain Typha was in full support of this motion, and the Jedi backed it. Obi Wan was in charge of this due to the fact that he was the highest rank between himself and Anakin. He considered the entire situation from the day before, realizing that Anakin would be too emotionally invested in Padme. It could hurt the mission at hand. Kenobi was willing to trust Anakin because of his skills, but realistically, emotionally, Anakin could not be trusted in this scenario. Obi-Wan thought hard about this. The night following Zam's death involved Kenobi reporting his findings to the Council and sending Anakin off to sleep as the Naboo security doubled to protect their senator. Obi-Wan meditated on his concerns, and at the end of the night, he came to his resolution. He would do the initial part of the work for Anakin before he woke up, meeting Dexter outside of his diner before it opened. It was the small diner owner that was able to inform him that the dart that killed Zam was from Kamino. That gave Obi-Wan enough information to hand over to Anakin. What Obi-Wan didn't realize was that Kamino was removed from the Jedi archives, so when he returned to Padme's residence, he found a just waking up Anakin and Padme who were speaking about what was to come. Obi-Wan informed them of what he was going to do from here on out. He handed Anakin all the information he had on the investigation thus far, and told him that there was information vital to this case on the planet of Kamino. Kenobi continued and expressed that this mission very well could define the eventual knighthood for Anakin. He was excited and he told Anakin that he believed this mission should be very easy for him to complete. Skywalker was a little annoyed with this. He'd been asking for his first solo mission for months, and finally, when he gets it, he's sent to Kamino without Padme. It was outrageous and unfair. But he would do as his master asked him to do. Anakin did ask about Obi-Wan and what he would be doing, to which his master told him that he was watching over Padme. He would take her to Naboo and then escort her back upon the Council's orders. Again, being that Anakin was so emotionally invested in Padme, he was upset by this. Kenobi just wanted to oversee this leg of the mission as well. As Padme and Kenobi left, Obi-Wan reinforced his orders about contacting himself or the Council if he needed any assistance with this mission. Anakin understood as he watched his master in an undercover outfit and the love of his life stroll away back to Naboo with R2-D2. Padme was very relieved about this. The previous night, she had turned the cameras off in her room because she didn't want anyone watching her while she slept. While she was happy to see Anakin again and believed that he was a good friend, her focuses were on trying to stop the Military Creation Act from being finalized. Kenobi understood this, and due to his vast understanding of the political landscape they were now in, he wanted to be diligent when it came to making sure Padme got back to Coruscant before they ever got around to signing the Military Creation Act. The MC Act would make it appear that the Republic wanted war, which as a Jedi, Obi-Wan was inclined and even supposed to stop. The Jedi Master and Senator eventually loaded up into a civilian transport and they left the planet of Coruscant. Anakin, on the other hand, was annoyed, but he did as his master asked. He tried to force himself to see the positives in this situation. His biggest motivation was completing the mission himself, so that he could gain the rank of knight and do whatever he wanted. If Anakin was a knight, he could escort Padme to Naboo, or whatever. He truthfully, and even a bit selfishly, hoped that these debriefings in the Senate continued to elongate. While he didn't really understand what was really at stake, he did know that if Padme needed protection and he was a Jedi Knight, he could be said protection, which in his mind was a good deal. Upon his return to the Jedi Temple, he went to the archives to look for Kamino so that he could chart a course and investigate. However, there was a small issue. The planet didn't exist. He eventually got around to asking Jocasta Nu, and she told him that if it wasn't in the archives, then it didn't exist. Anakin wasn't much for studies, but in an effort to figure out what was going on here, he decided to take a deeper look. The coordinates given to him by Obi-Wan showed a planet that should be just beyond the Rishi Maze. In accordance to his studies, the ones that he barely paid any attention to, all the gravity in space should have been offset, because if there was no planet where there was supposed to be a planet, then the natural order of gravity would be different, or something, right? Anakin was able to get assistance from Master Yoda and a class of younglings. One of the children noted that if a planet existed and wasn't in the archives, then someone had to have deleted the information. Yoda agreed with the sentiment, keeping his eyes on Anakin, who thought it was odd but didn't question much further than that. Why would he? Didn't care, didn't matter. Before Anakin left, Yoda stopped him and excused himself from the class. He told the Jedi apprentice, knowing that this was his first mission, to trust the Force. If something unpredicted came along, then he was instructed to contact the old folks' home frequency on Coruscant. It would put him directly in touch with himself or Mace Windu. Anakin smiled and nodded his head, thanking Yoda before rushing off. Yoda stood silently for a moment, watching Anakin dart into the distance, before turning back around and continuing his instruction with the students. Obi Wan and Padme inside the civilian transport were doing just fine. They were catching up over some food and telling stories in a very civilized manner. Kenobi was very used to these types of conversations. In a way, having these conversations made him miss Satine. She was the light of his life, and being that Padme and Satine were very similar in personality, he couldn't help but notice his emotions on the matter. He didn't let them arise, just something he consciously noted and moved on from. Padme did voice that she was glad he came along for the mission. As she switched topics and delved into her hopes for this, Obi-Wan listened. Just as he predicted, Padme would want to be ready and alert just in case there was a need for a call to action. The Senate could move on this bill any day now, and they needed to be ready. Obi-Wan completely agreed, informing her that he informed the council to keep him updated on the matter. Master Opa Rencesis was watching over the Senate closely as it was, so this was an extra incentive for him to be locked in. Anakin, on the other hand, traveled with a little astromech, one he wasn't even familiar with. The droid's operating number was U9C4. They arrived out of hyperspace and detached from their hyperspace ring over the planet of Kamino. Anakin looked down and was confused, pulling up a hologram of the planets in the area from the Jedi Temple. It seemed like the youngling was correct. Someone did delete this planet from the archives, but then a question, one that didn't show itself inside the temple, crossed his mind. Why would someone delete an entire planet from the archives? That didn't make sense. What were they hiding? Anakin sped forward as he flew down through the atmosphere and landed on a small landing platform. He raised his robes over his head as he leapt out of the vessel and walked towards the facility. The doors opened up for him as he walked in. As he did, he was approached by a local, one who softly introduced herself as Taun We. She called him a Jedi Master, not even noticing the Padawan braid. Even if she had, she likely wouldn't know what that meant as it was. She expressed excitement to see him. Anakin was even more confused now. They were waiting for him? She continued on and mentioned that she would bring him to the Prime Minister. Anakin watched her turn around and panicked. What was he supposed to do here? He never paid attention during negotiations classes. All he had to go off of were missions with Obi-Wan. Hopefully he could squeeze by these conversations, but even more, how would someone be waiting for them if someone else deleted this information from the archives? Maybe a member of the Lost 20, perhaps even another Jedi, such as a disappearing council member? As they walked through the halls, Anakin wondered why the Jedi never thought twice about cryostasis or Yaddar disappearing. What was their names? He didn't really know. Just thought he was panicking. On Naboo, Obi-Wan and Padme were going to her family's villa on the far side of the planet. Her family welcomed him with hugs and happiness. They remembered him from the blockade days. He was crucial to saving their people. Obi-Wan was grateful to be with his family again. It had been too long. Solo was always a joy to see, even though she playfully teased her sister about Obi-Wan being the first boy to bring home. Padme had no interest in Obi-Wan, and the same could be said from him to her. They had a great friendship, but Solo loved to play, so it wasn't a big deal. Obi-Wan spent time with the mother and father of the family, and they eventually settled in for dinner. This was a much better life in Obi-Wan's opinion. As much as he enjoyed the relaxation of her life on Naboo, he did hope that Anakin was alright. He almost checked in on him, but Obi-Wan was trying to actually trust his student. He believed Anakin would get this right. On Kamino, Anakin was having an anxiety attack. He sat down across from Lama Su, who greeted him as a Jedi Master. Anakin did like the sound of that, but he was in over his head here. What was he supposed to do? Lama Su referenced Anakin's master, Sifo Dyas, and now he was even more confused. Anakin told him that Sifo Dyas had vanished around 10 years ago. Did they know anything about that? The Kaminoans were confused too, but Lama Su shook his head, telling him that it was a shame. Sifo Dyas was a good man, but he would have been proud of the army they created for him. Anakin looked at this Kaminoan and nodded his head, asking about the army. The Prime Minister told Anakin that they would love to show him their work, and Anakin nodded his head and played along. Something seemed really off about the entire thing. But what exactly was going on here? Did the Council approve the creation of a clone army? Was Sifo Dyas' name really not cryostasis? Did the Kaminoans have something to do with the disappearance and or the death of the former Council member? So many questions remained. Anakin continued and followed the Kaminoans around as they explained everything, telling him about the clones, about their genome donor, and a couple other things. Anakin heard the word bounty hunter and immediately considered that this individual was the one who tried to kill Padme. Skywalker then very impatiently followed the Kaminoans as he saw thousands of clones, with 1 million more on the way. For such a small grouping of facilities, they really did do an impressive job. But what exactly did Sifo Dyas fear? Was there something he believed was coming? Did he place the order for the clone army and vanish, or did he do someone's bidding and get killed after doing what he thought was the right thing? Instead of looking at the situation practically, Anakin considered the hypotheticals at play here. There was no doubt that Sifo Dyas was responsible for this army, but why was the question he wanted an answer to. As Anakin eventually got his chance to speak with Jango, he got a little excited. Finally, some action. When he walked in the room, he saw a door open, and inside the door was Mandalorian armor. Skywalker realized that this was indeed the man he was meant to find. He waited impatiently for Jango to come out. Had Jango known there were going to be visitors, he would have hid his armor or had it on. But, fresh removed from a shower, he saw an NC Jedi Padawan. This immediately put him on edge. There was likely another Jedi in this facility. He needed to play his cards very carefully. Jango asked the young Jedi what he owed the honor to. Anakin skipped all the tomfoolery and asked Jango if he was on Coruscant lately. The bounty hunter shook his head, but kept a cool and calm demeanor. Anakin didn't like this, and so he told Jango that he'd be brought back to the temple for investigation. Jango said that wouldn't be necessary. Anakin ignited his lightsaber and pointed it forward, but Jango saw this move coming before he ever did it. His leg kicked Anakin in the shin and he threw his fist forward, jabbing Anakin in the arm and forcing him to drop his lightsaber. Skywalker looked up with confusion as Jango lowered his head with a bit of arrogance. In his face was certainty, as if he were telling Anakin to stop now while he still breathed. Anakin threw his hand forward and Jango caught it, seeing that this wouldn't be a peaceful discussion and locked in. Jango jabbed Anakin a number of times in his back, right where his kidney was. The pain was excruciating, but Anakin elbowed Jango in the jaw and broke out. He held his back before they got into more fisticuffs. Skywalker had a very good reach over Jango, but the skills and training Jango had would put to rest any semblance of advantage that Skywalker thought he had. Their fists landed their blows as each of them took jarring strikes to their bodies. It became a battle of attrition, trading blows on the other before Anakin was kicked off of his feet. Jango saw his opportunity. It had been a while since he had a chance to kill a Jedi with his bare hands. Even in that past instance, he was wearing his armor. Jango could see Anakin reach for his lightsaber and stomp it on his wrist, crushing it. Anakin wheezed in pain as he swung his left hand back before being backhanded across the face. Jango moved to wrap his arms around Anakin's neck so he could put the kid out of his misery, but Anakin used all of his strength to kick Jango forward into the wall behind him. Anakin grabbed his lightsaber and with his broken wrist, used his left hand to ignite the weapon and swing upwards. The strike removed Jango's entire arm, as Anakin shoved his blade against Jango's neck, telling him if he moved another muscle, he'd be gutted like the filth he was. Jango taunted Anakin, telling him that those weren't words for a Jedi. Anakin got flustered, and Jango, despite the sheer amount of pain he was in, threw his other elbow into Anakin's rib, as he heard a cracking sound. Jango reached for the lightsaber as Anakin dragged the weapon around and cut his hand off, before using the force to launch him back into the wall, knocking him unconscious. Anakin turned back and pointed the weapon at the other two, telling them to stay back. Taun We was shocked, but Anakin needed some cufflinks. Not for Jango's hands, but his feet. As Skywalker was preparing to contact Master Yoda, Obi Wan and Padme were sitting down for dinner, after a charming tea time and story hour. They were chuckling with each other as they sat down at separate ends of the table. Padme asked Obi Wan about his hopes and dreams, and he told her what he wanted for Anakin, and how Skywalker really was like a child of his. Obi Wan's dreams and hopes revolved around his student. It was endearing to say the least, but Padme was hoping that Obi Wan had his own hopes. It led to an interesting conversation about Satine, and of course, more laughs. The two of them were having a wonderful time. Anakin hobbled his way back to his vessel and kept an eye on Jango, until his reinforcements arrived. In the meantime, he woke Jango up and began an aggressive negotiation. He demanded to know what he knew about Sifo Dyas. The bounty hunter didn't even know who that was, expressing that he was hired by a man named Tyrannus. Anakin continued going through questions but not really understanding or getting anything. There had to be more. How could Sifo-Dyas place the order for the clone army but not be involved? The Jedi Council, who sent Masters Yoda, Shakti, Saesee-Tiin, and Depa Billaba to Kamino, also informed Obi-Wan that the bounty hunter was caught. Even though there wasn't a motion in the Senate yet, thanks to continuous updates from Oppa Rancisis, they were clear to return home. With Dooku unaware of where she was, which Padme firmly believed he was behind this, it could be the perfect way to distract him by having another decoy do a public speech at the Theed Palace. Padme informed the Queen, and it was agreed upon. Even though it was late in the evening, it'd be the best way to keep Padme's return to Coruscant quiet. When or if the Republic motioned for the Military Creation Act, she'd be ready. After hours of getting nowhere, Yoda, Shakti, Saesee-Tiin, and Depa Billaba arrived to investigate Kamino. Due to the nature of how political it could sound with the Jedi creating a clone army, they sent some of their best to investigate. Depa Billaba was here with a couple temple guards to take Jango back to Coruscant. Shakti and Yoda arrived in a separate T6 shuttle, so Depa could return with Jango without trapping the other Jedi. Yoda sent Anakin to bed inside the T6 to get some rest, after he got some much-needed medical treatment. All the while, the Jedi would begin their investigation of the Kaminoans. Inside the shuttle, Anakin had a night terror, shortly after he received his medical treatment. Yoda was inside the facilities following along when he felt the change and instructed Shakti and Saesee-Tiin to continue their work here. He would return. When he got out to the ship, Anakin was throwing robes over himself. Yoda asked where he was going, and Anakin told him the truth. He had a terrible nightmare, and it was clouding his judgment. This wasn't the first time either. Yoda told Anakin to be careful when sensing the future. He understood, but he expressed that his mother was in pain right now. If they didn't do something, she could be killed. Anakin understood the Jedi practice, but if they were meant to upkeep the peace, then why allow her to be killed in such a scenario? Yoda technically couldn't refute that, so he decided against his better judgment to accompany Anakin to Tatooine to find his mother. As Grand Master, that journey would be very jarring. The other two council members didn't see anything especially wrong with what was going on at Kamino. It was very odd, but it didn't seem like someone was messing around with it. However, they wanted to know who this Tyrannus person was. Anakin mentioned it. Truthfully speaking, Yoda and the other council members were very impressed. Not only did Anakin capture the bounty hunter responsible for trying to kill Padme, but he was able to provide important details for a completely separate mystery, one the council itself had neglected for too long. At the same time, Kenobi and Padme quietly returned to Coruscant to begin the next leg of their plan, waiting. It was a really nice change of pace for the two of them, but especially for Obi-Wan. It had been difficult being Anakin's instructor. He loved the kid, but sometimes he could really do his head in. But he did hear that Anakin did well on his mission, so that's all Obi-Wan could really hope for. On Tatooine, after speaking with Watto, Skywalker and Yoda visited the Lars homestead, and then Anakin, despite Yoda warning against it again, decided to go and find his mother. Yoda could sense the confusion, and he didn't want to encourage it, but at this point he needed to be there. For Yoda, there was no going back. He came here with Anakin, and he needed to finish the side quest with him. They came across the Tuskens, and the two Jedi found the hut that Shmi was being kept inside of. She was almost killed by these raiders. Yoda was horrified, but he could sense something more. There was a deep-seated anger that resided within Anakin, and it was rising. For the first time, perhaps in his life, did he realize the lengths of which this darkness went. As Shmi started to lose her life, Yoda acted. He moved around Shmi's side and closed his eyes, focusing on the living force and transcending a piece of himself to her, so that she could live. As a small creature, it was very hard, and the Jedi did not traditionally encourage this, but Yoda knew the method, and he needed to figure out how to prevent a Dooku 2.0 from rising from within. This was perhaps the best way to do so. Shmi regained a bit of her consciousness as she felt warmer to the touch. Anakin asked her if she was alright, and Yoda spoke for her, explaining that she would have more energy, but she still needed to be kept safe. Anakin told Yoda to take her back to the speeders. He had unfinished business. First of all, what? Second of all, Yoda stopped Anakin, telling him to focus on what the light had brought them. Shmi was okay. It was time to go. What Anakin didn't understand, and would understand later, is that while the Jedi were to encourage balance, the Tusken Raiders were a part of the natural balance of Tatooine. So if the Jedi wiped them out, they would disrupt an ecosystem. There was a kind of blurred line when it came to stuff like the Hutts, but to answer that question, Yoda said that the crime families did need to be wiped out. But if they did that, the system would also technically fall into chaos and civil wars. There were ecosystems everywhere, and the Jedi were meant to maintain balance in each of them. To Anakin, this seemed unreasonable, but it was the Jedi way. Had the Tuskens been a group of off-world pirates, then yes, they could be dealt with. But Tuskens had their own ecosystem. There were tribes, big and small, peaceful and violent. They would have their own evolution on their own. If the Jedi intervened, it could disrupt such an evolution. In the future, the Tuskens could be the face of Tatooine, as a peaceful tribe of liberators, or they could be just seen as conquerors. But it was not the job of the Jedi to decide the fate of this ecosystem. It was the will of the Force, and that of its evolution. On Coruscant, the Jedi informed the Chancellor that they captured the bounty hunter that tried to kill Padme Amidala. He was at first relieved, and then he realized that Jango was the same man responsible for the clone trooper genome. The Jedi, without Palpatine's intervention, gave Jango a deal. If he told them everything he knew, they'd take care of his wounds. So, he told them everything, and they gave him a new arm and a hand, and he got top medical care inside the temple before being sent to prison. It was a fair trade. He would never see prison because Sidious would suffocate him from another room, believing that he stopped Jango from potentially sharing anything of value. That was kind of unlucky for him. Jango told the Jedi what little he could remember from 10 years ago. He did tell them that Tyrannus operated from Sereno and sometimes other places. This also did include his ties with the Trade Federation? Jango wasn't entirely sure, but he saw their battleships docked on Geonosis. To the Jedi, it was clear that Tyrannus was probably Dooku. There was no way around that. And the one man who almost ruined it all for the Jedi and the Republic was infinitely wrong one-liner man, Ki-Adi-Mundi. He once again suggested that Dooku was simply that, a political idealist. The Jedi informed Shakti and Saesee Tiin, as well as Anakin and Yoda, who were returning from their trip to Tatooine, after having saved Shmi and said their goodbyes to her at the Lars homestead. Yoda kept Anakin with him, who was still healing, and sent Saesee and Shakti on a more in-depth investigation of the facility. Yoda and Anakin cornered Nala Se, Tanwi, and Lama Su in the executive offices and demanded to know if they recognized Dooku. The Kaminoans caved, but they didn't know anything else. Anakin and Yoda didn't believe that, so they pressed further. On the other side of the galaxy, Sidious was worried. After learning about Jango being in the hands of the Jedi and killing him himself, hopefully, before he told them anything, he told his apprentice to take a task force to Kamino and kill the Jedi. They could not learn a thing. Despite Palpatine knowing that Anakin was sent there, he didn't need this information coming out, and because he didn't know Padme was home yet, he was able to convince Jar Jar to call for an emergency session inside the Senate. Palpatine's plans were to eliminate the Kaminoan leadership, save Nala Se because she was useful, potentially kill all the Jedi, cover it up, and then gain emergency power to start the war. Palpatine was kinda stuck though. His initial plans went something along the lines of, Padme died in one assassination attempt, Dooku would tell the Kaminoans to contact the Jedi, there'd be something similar to the blockade of Naboo, and he could pass the blame off of the clone army onto the Jedi. But now Palpatine was racing to make everything fit so he didn't lose his power, and so that he could maintain the status quo at the very least. So when Jar Jar called this meeting, he felt relief. All the racing in his head had disappeared. Until before the meeting started, Padme showed up with Obi Wan as her protector beside her. Jar Jar's original motion was put to sleep before it could ever be heard, and Padme revealed everything they learned thus far. The Jedi from Kamino had been rapid in communication with the temple. Obi-Wan had everything he needed to convey what they knew now. From what it seemed, Dooku used a former Jedi Master as a scapegoat, and then murdered him. Dooku then used Sifo Dyas' credentials to create a grand army of the Republic. Obi-Wan explained that everything that was built up to this conflict was because of Dooku. It was either because he wanted to gain power for himself, or someone else to gain power within the Republic. As Obi-Wan was speaking, something inside Padme's mind clicked. She looked at her longtime advisor and saw the scowl on his face, and she turned to Jar Jar and whispered something inaudible to Obi-Wan in his ear. The Jedi Knight continued and said that the Jedi were investigating everything on Kamino. As he expressed, the last thing the galaxy needed was war. And if this information was made public to the Confederacy movement, the star systems that fled the Republic would return and they could make peace. As he stepped back, the Senate erupted into discourse from different star systems. Palpatine stepped forward and quelled the disagreements. He was always brilliant at the political side of things. He told them that these Lens were idealistic, but who knew if the Jedi could be trusted? This was an investigation that the Senate was not aware of. and it was not under Senate mandate. They were, after all, only supposed to protect Senator Amidala. Padme waited eagerly as she spoke up when Palpatine finished. He explained how they needed to militarize to stop the threats of the Separatist alliance. When she got a chance to speak, she reiterated points made by her speech only days before. Following her assassination, in a deleted scene, Padme spoke about their need to avoid war. And finally, after years of neglect, she saw what Palpatine was. In that moment, when the Senate rallied around her voice to stop the creation of the security bill, Palpatine expressed that it was too late to continue and that they would pick up in their discussions in the morning. Obviously, that didn't happen when another assassination attempt forced her from Coruscant. Padme turned to Jar Jar and nodded her head. He stepped up as she expressed that her colleague had a motion he wanted to use when she was finished. Jar Jar spoke about Palpatine's desires to try and go forward with this bill, and Lady Amidala's desire to make sure the Separatists didn't see the Republic as trying to mobilize for the war. In an effort to stop all of it, Jar Jar expressed that there needed to be an end to these discussions, and it had to start at the top, calling for a vote of no confidence in Palpatine's leadership. Shock filled his body as he tried to figure out how to counter this, but it was too late. Padme just showed the Republic his true colors, and at the second failure of her assassination and her ability to focus solely on this bill, the Republic could be saved from war. Padme saw it. For years, the courts were dragging their feet for the trial of Newt Gunray in the Trade Federation. Gunray was still the viceroy, and nothing had been done. Palpatine hadn't done anything to slow the growth of the Separatist movement, and when they finally showed power, he decided that an act of war was necessary? Not only this, but what Obi Wan said resonated with her. Maybe Dooku and Palpatine were friends, and with political leverage, they could both retain the most power in the galaxy through war, but no more. On Kamino, there was trouble brewing. Dooku brought a really strong miniature task force. He landed with Trade Federation dropships and released Grievous and Asajj into the facility. Dooku was here to destroy any connections back to him, but it was already too late. Even though the Jedi didn't learn of the executive orders, Dooku was exposed as a whole. Anakin was wounded, so he was sent to defend the Kaminoans as Yoda confronted Dooku, while Shaak Ti and Saesee Tiin prepared for Asajj and Grievous. With the clones present, they were quickly enlisted in the combat for the first time. Dooku only brought B-2 battle droids, and he brought enough to kill who he was here for. There was a Trade Federation battleship over the planet, but its troops shouldn't be necessary. A duel with Dooku began as he told Yoda that he shouldn't have come. Yoda demanded for answers regarding Dooku's master, and he told Yoda that he should have been wiser to sense it. He and his master were closer than any Jedi and Sith had any right to be. Their blades thrusted together. Far from their duel was Saesee Tiin and Shaak Ti, fending off Grievous, Asajj, and dozens of B-2s. From behind them came the clones. All sorts of them. Pilots, regs, commandos, captains, ARC troopers. Didn't really matter. They were here to defend their home. The battle raged across the front edge of the facility. Saesee and Shaak Ti were struggling, but with the aid of the clones, who were ready for this, they were able to meet in a stalemate. Anakin could hear the rumbling of blasters from the command room, where he was holding the captured Kaminoans. He wanted to be a part of the action, but he couldn't. Not in his condition. Grievous and his B-2s were overwhelming the clones, as Shaak Ti lost one of her Laku as she stumbled backwards. Grievous nearly struck her down as a rocket blasted past Grievous and detonated a number of B-2s. A couple clones used grapples to hold Grievous back, but he pulled the clones into his blades as they did. Saesee struggled with Asajj. Despite her role as an assassin, she was not much younger than Obi Wan and vicious. He was on the back pedal with her as the battle droids pushed the clone lines and started making their way for the command room where Anakin was. Dooku and Yoda were still struggling for control over their own battlefield. The Count was magnificent with the blade, and Yoda taught him all of his moves, but the darkness within Dooku made him easier to combat for Yoda. He stepped back and around, using his speed and size to his advantage. They had done this tussle 100 times and again, only now it was life and death. Yoda got around Dooku, who blasted lightning at the Grand Master. He used all of his energy to bounce it back towards his apprentice. Dooku used a continuous line of electricity, and Yoda harnessed all of the power and sent it back into him. It was no longer a contest with the blade, and Yoda didn't want to do it, but it was necessary. Dooku was so consumed with his own power and proving it to Yoda that he was unprepared when that power came back at him and enveloped his body. He cried out in pain as electricity cut through him, and after what felt like centuries, he fell to the ground lifelessly. Yoda frowned before grabbing his lightsaber with the Force and running out into the combat. He came from behind the B-2 droids, as he cut through their forces when they couldn't see him. From the legs, shoulders, or chest, he ripped through each of them. Yoda leapt from battle droid to battle droid as he moved to control the battlefield. In front of him, he could see Shakti fall to the ground and Grievous prepared to strike her down. Yoda used the Force to launch his lightsaber down the corridor as it slammed into Grievous's back, and he reacted by tightening his shoulders and looking down at the green lightsaber in his chest. Yoda leapt off the battle droid and landed in front of them, as he threw his hands forward and released a shockwave, dispatching the remaining battle droids. Shakti pointed down the hall where Stacey was thrown into the wall by Asajj, before ducking her strike. He pulled around and shoulder checked her. She prepared for a counter, and as she did, her weapons were stuck. She couldn't move. She then turned around as she saw Master Yoda pull her weapons into his hands. Before she could react, Asajj was stunned by a clone. They won. Yoda immediately informed Oppo of everything he understood here on Kamino. Oppo then relayed all the information to Obi-Wan and the Council as the political battleground continued to evolve, with Palpatine being ousted from power. He couldn't believe it. Everything he and Dooku did was completely upended. He wanted to kill everyone here, but the rule of two needed to survive, and he had mastered immortality, and Dooku wasn't worthy enough to be a Sith Lord in his mind. Palpatine left quietly as a re-election began. The Jedi Council, on the other hand, with the guidance of Oppo, who had been watching everything, put it together. From the sentiments made by Senator Amidala and Master Kenobi, along with the evidence from Kamino, Jango, and what Yoda said Dooku said, it was clear that it had to be Palpatine. Yoda always was close with the Chancellors, and that was evident throughout his career as a Grand Master. The Sith Lord had to be Palpatine. As the former Chancellor left his offices, he was jumped by the remaining Council members on planet and sedated. They did the necessary checks and they found that Oppo was right. Instead of giving him a morally sound death, they buried him in liquid duocrete, and then allowed it to solidify. They would eventually use this duocrete to turn Palpatine into a pillar inside the Jedi Temple. In the minds of the Jedi, it was a poetic way for the Sith to die. Despite Maul playing with snakes on an acid rain-filled trash world, his brother would never come look for him. Asajj Ventress would be imprisoned for her work to try and start the war, or simply put, collaboration. The Clone Army fiasco was something that the Jedi and the Republic had to ease their way through, but the result would be that of a unified government, one that could focus on tackling the issues left behind in the Palpatine administration. Despite all the carnage unfolding within the Republic and their attempts to bring the Separatists back into the Republic, Anakin found himself a newly promoted Jedi Knight. He couldn't be happier, and Obi-Wan couldn't be prouder. Padme was able to show support by sending him a letter and wishing him success as a Jedi Knight, and while Anakin would want to be with Padme, he could see that if Obi-Wan hadn't sent him to Kamino, they might be in the middle of a crisis. On a note about partners and romance, because the Republic was attempting to listen, especially with the new Chancellor, the leader of Mandalore came to Coruscant and spoke on behalf of the neutral systems, the ones that didn't form a coalition but stayed away from the political soap opera of the Republic. Satine told the Republic why people didn't trust it, and why, from her perspective, the Separatists were forming, with or without collusion from Dooku. The Republic didn't like what she had to say, but it was right, and it would be with their new leadership that they would take the advice and avoid war. Things wouldn't be perfect, but after a few years, all the Separatist worlds would unite with the Republic again. While Satine was on Coruscant, she and Obi-Wan were able to spend some much-needed time together. What would come from this was what their hearts desired. The armies of the Confederacy and the Republic would face their own set of decisions. It would be decided by both the former Confederacy and the Republic to use them in a conquest of the unconquered galaxy, including the Outer Rim and unknown regions. The Jedi didn't support all-out war, but they could get behind removing the crime families from power. Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker's focus would move from Padme to his newest endeavor, teaching. He would still have Ahsoka, but there would be no war for him to actively partake in, especially because he didn't want to bring a Padawan to the conquest of the Outer Rim and unknown regions. With the Sith gone, the Jedi could continue to sow peace into the galaxy, and within a decade, the Republic would be the standing power in the galaxy, but now making room for representatives and senators from an array of new systems across the now free territory. And that, my friends, is our story. Again, special thanks to all of our patrons: Benjamin Wells, Ozpin, Angel Dust, Alexandra Reese, The Beginning and End, Wolf Lover 1997, Jango Fat Clone, Nick 5098, INTJ Recluse, Ben Ingram, The Big Red Pure Mark, Diamond Constant, Darth Nemesis, Lord Tibbs, CC2024, Galavic Gaming, Tristan Mandalore, Sir William 1767, Darth Revan, Granity Bane, Laliant, Sky Guy, Penguin, Cullen Rooney, Shark Midori, RJ38, Nick, Michael Erlanger, The Last Jedi, Apollo, Weewa 670, Annika Stank Runner, CT7567, Toaster Oven, Oz of Oz, Darth Knox, The Eternal Padawan, Josh Joshua Tam, Johnny Nguyen, Sansa Skeleton, Jedi Sloth, Mr. Yeet, Gamer, Lord Cali, Galaxy 66, Mammoth Studios, Anakin 003, Lord Draken, Fortis Legacy Star Wars, Airbus, Rex the Wolf, the Man 3 First Names, Dark Saint 46, Rosebird, Hunter Belden, Baron Joshua, and Lord Deadwing. For supporting the channel, smash that like button, support what it is. Check out this channel, cool things on there. Otherwise, let's talk about this story. So this video started out as a joke. The idea of Anakin getting into a fight with Jango and getting beat up and doing something so far beyond his own comprehension while Obi Wan is having tea with Padme just seemed really funny to me. While the initial idea is funny and I think it works in a comedic way, I also had a lot of fun of taking the more political aspect of Attack of the Clones and putting it into this. There's a really cool deleted scene with Padme in the beginning of the movie following her assassination, and I wanted that to be the basis for the political environment in this video. Like all the Padme scenes from the prequels, most of her best ones are in the deleted scenes, and so I really wanted to focus in on that aspect of her in this story. And almost the way of how, because she's not focused on starting a relationship with Anakin, she's more focused on what's happening on Coruscant and actively going back there. And so in a weird way that kind of works out for her. As well as for Anakin, he has that peace with his mother, and having both his mom and Ahsoka really allow him to kind of move on from the romantic attachment. As for Obi Wan and Satine, that's up to your own interpretation when I said their heart's desires. So I hope you all enjoyed. I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.